Well, hello, and welcome to another knitting video with me. Now is where it gets very exciting because we are today, I technically am going to show you how to knit a sweater. And don't worry if you've never knitted a sweater before. I am going to show you, this is like a super simple and easy sweater to make with very chunky yarn and with big needles, which means that this is a project that you can complete pretty quickly. And I have already knitted some of the pieces beforehand because it still takes a while. I think I started this project maybe 2 weeks ago or something, or probably even less, like 1.5 weeks ago or something. And yeah, we're just gonna dive right into it. Oh yes, there is also a link in the description below to download the pattern. So I made a PDF pattern, like a written instruction, so you can go ahead and download that if you want to do this later, or if you just need to get reminded of something. So just click the link below. All right, without further ado, so the way it's gonna work is, for this sweater, we're knitting everything flat, so that means that you knit back and forth. The only things you need to know, and I'm also going to show you in this video, is how to rib knit. So you need to know how to knit stitch and purl stitch. And if you don't know how to do that, then I recommend that you check out the 2 previous videos first that I made, just so taking it one step at a time. So you can first just practice knitting and then purling just before you get into this project. Or if you're very into knitting and you want to do this all in one go, then you're more than welcome to. Then we're also going to decrease some stitches for the neckline here. So this is how the first piece, like for the front, and the back is also going to look the same. And as you can see here, I have scooped out, so this is going to be, I hope the microphone doesn't get all squishy now. So this is going to be the front piece, and then we're also knitting 2 sleeves, and let's get right into it. So I have also made a pattern for this, so a PDF that you can download. So again, there's a link below that you can click, and then you can download the pattern also in written format. So what is a tension swatch? Well, when you knit, everybody has a little bit of a different tension, which means that your knitted fabric might be a different tension, so how loose or how stiff it becomes essentially when you knit it, which means that then when you follow a pattern that has a set of measurements, if you knit much looser than the person who made that pattern, your measurements are going to be all wonky, and you might end up with a size XL, so extra large sweater, even when you were trying to make a medium-sized sweater. So that's why it's good to do tension swatches. And the way you do this is essentially you just knit a little piece of fabric with the needles that you intend to use. So here is a tension swatch that I made with these knitting needles in size 8, which I've used for this project. And then the way you know if your tension matches the tension of the pattern is that you will take a ruler or a measuring tape and look at 10 centimeters. So I'm not sure in the US, I think in the US it's maybe a few inches, or well, at least in Europe it's 10 centimeters that you want to be looking for. And then you're going to put some little markers there, and then you just count how many stitches you make on 10 centimeters. And this is called gauge, and every pattern usually has that. So for this pattern, the gauge is for 10 centimeters. There are going to be 12 stitches. So that is the tension or the looseness or the gauge that you want to be hitting. So if you make a little tension swatch, and then say you have 13 stitches on 10 centimeters, then maybe you have to choose instead needles that go down a size. So that would be 7mm needles instead. Okay, one more thing about tension. So this project is mainly going to be knitted in stockinette stitch, which is you purl 1 row and then you knit 1 row and then you repeat. Well, I know, and I know that a lot of knitters have this, that when I purl, the rows tend to become much looser, which ends up looking like this then, that you can really see where I've purled the row because that's much looser. So what I did for this project is every knitted row I knitted with 8mm needles. For every purl row, I then knitted that with a 7mm needle. And I felt like the results were much more smooth and even. So this is something that you might want to try out. Obviously, if you're very new to knitting, don't worry about this. This is the first time I actually tried this little trick that I saw in a YouTube video, but I was just, yeah, kind of bothered by that it was so different and really like sticking out, especially in this white or light colored yarn. So something to think about if you really feel like, oh, why is it so even? That might just be because your purl rows, or maybe the knit rows, but usually it's the purl rows that get a little bit more loose. All right, so first up, when you've made your tension swatch and you know what needles you're going to be using, we are going to be casting on 7 stitches, and both for the front and for the back side, they're going to be exactly the same. So you're going to be casting on 70 stitches, and then these first 9 rows are rib stitch. So that means you purl 1, you knit 1, and then on the reverse side, for every purl, you knit that 1, and for every knit, you purl that 1. No, I said that already. For every purl, you knit that 1. For every knit, you purl that on the back side. So you get this nice rib, and you usually do a ribbing at the end, because otherwise knit gets like it gets curly, so it curls itself up like this, which isn't always so nice if you don't want that effect. So that is usually why you start with a rib or end a piece with a rib. One little trick, so you can see that these are pretty defined, my rib stitch, and on the other side it doesn't look as defined, and that's because all the knit stitches I have twisted. So that means that I've knitted them through the back loop. So on the right side I've knitted them through the back loop, and then on the reverse side I've also knitted them through the back loop, but of course then I've knitted the purl stitches through the back loop, because these purl stitches are the ones that are the knit stitch on the front side. This is optional, you don't have to do this, again, depending on your level, but I just wanted to let you know, because maybe you're doing your rib stitch and it looks very different. So then it's probably, this is the reason, because I have twisted all the knit stitches on the front side and also then twisted all the purl stitches on the back side, or knitted through the back loop. So just wanted to make sure that I say that. So how I would do this, let me just show you. So instead of going through here, I've twisted them, so I go in through the back loop for all the knit stitches. So this is now my right side. This is now the other side, so the side that will be the reverse side. So here I instead do this with all the purl stitches. So instead of going in through here, I go in through the back. And after a while, you can see that this becomes really nice looking and very defined rib stitch. So after you have knitted your rib stitched your 9 rows, then you're just going to continue with stockinette stitch, and you're going to continue that for, let me just see, so approximately 43 centimeters of stockinette stitch after you have done those first purl stitches. And now I'm going to be showing you how to make this neckline, and I have actually prepared the other piece, which is going to be the back piece, which is going to be knitted exactly the same way, and I've already prepared that because it would take, or this would become a very long video if I would make it here. Oh my god, ooh, and we have some fallen stitches, and Viggo is going crazy. Oh. All right, so here it is how it looks at the moment. And as you can see, I'm using, this is a 7mm needle, and then I'm using also an 8mm needle. So it's a little bit of a wonky system, but don't mind that. So we are going to knit 29, then we're going to cast off 12, and then we are going to start to do the decreases first on this side, and then we finish that off, cast off, and then we go back and we do the other side. So let's just do that. So let's just start by knitting 29 stitches, just as you would do normally. 27, 28, and 29. Okay, so now I've just knitted the first 29 stitches, and now the next 12 stitches I'm going to be casting off. So very simple, just knit 1, knit 2, then drag the first stitch over the second one. So there I've cast off now, well, 1 stitch. So this is the third, or the second, sorry. Also be careful when you cast off your stitches that you don't make them too tight, because I know that some people make them pretty tight. You don't want it to be too tight because this is going to be our neckline, and that would be a bummer if you can't actually get your head through the neckline or the neck hole. Okay, I think this was 11 maybe? Oh, I'm not sure, we have to count. 9, 10, yes, 11. Okay, so last one. All right, so now we've cast off 12 stitches, knitted 29, then we cast off 12 stitches here. We have 1 stitch on our right needle from the cast off row, and then I am essentially just going to decrease a stitch here. So the way you do that is by knitting these two together, and I want this to lean now to the left, so I'm going to go in through the back of the loop, wrap around the yarn and take it through, and then when you then go like this, you can see that these 2 stitches are now knitted together. And then I'm just going to continue knitting the entire row of stitches. And once you reach the end, you're just going to continue regularly, so just purling until we get to that stitch that we just knitted together, or those 2 stitches that we just knitted together. I am going to show you or give you a little trick. Okay, so when you come to the last 3 stitches, then we are going to knit these 2 together, and because we knitted the ones on the knit side from the back loop, we're also going to purl these one from the back loop. So you have your yarn over, and then, okay, now you can't maybe see, but I'm going in here through the back, so in through the back of the loops here from underneath, and then I'm wrapping the yarn around, and then I'm taking it through the same way, and then I'm letting all of that go. So I'm now purled 2 together from the back loop, and then just purl that last one. And the reason you want to be doing that is that you want all these stitches to be leaning, oops, the same way, so it creates a nice line. And then you're going to continue this for 10 more rows. So for every row, we are knitting 2 together or purling 2 together, and always leave 1 stitch from the edge. That just makes a nicer finish. And then just continue this for 10 more rows. So altogether, in the end, you should be left with 19 stitches that you're going to be casting off. So for each row, knit 2 together, so decreasing 1 stitch for each row. Hooray, end of the row. So now we can just pull that through. So, and you have now made the first edge for the neckline. All right, so now we're going to do the exact same thing on the second side. All right, so let's just start with purling. So I just grabbed my yarn here again. And for this first row, we're just gonna first knit 1 and then immediately start to decrease. So just decrease 2 by knitting 2 together. So now I'm doing it through the front loops. So just knitting 2 together like this, and then continue purl the entire row. And now I know that technically on the other side we started decreasing on the knit row, and now we started to decrease on the purl row. But honestly, 1 row here or there, really you are not going to be able to see that difference. So that's why I just start immediately, because it's going to be looking so similar. You will never be able to tell that it's actually, we started decreasing on one side on the purl side and on the other side on the knit side. And honestly, with knitting, like if there's something wonky that happens, a mistake that happens, you can always just get creative and improvise and fix those mistakes. Like, even though I know some knitters are very, very particular and want to make sure everything is exactly by the book, but I'm not really one of those knitters. Of course, you want to make sure that it looks nice, but you know, sometimes weird things happen, like the yarn gets twisted, there are holes that appear, and then you can just have to improvise and get a little bit creative in trying to fix it. All right, we are approaching that knitted, or the decrease here. So again, three stitches before, we're gonna stop, and then we are going to knit these 2 together now from the front loop. So as you would normally, but instead of 1 stitch, you have 2 stitches like that, and it creates a nice edge. and then knit the last one, and again repeat this 8 more times. So we've done 2 times, so repeat it 8 more times so that in the end you have 19 stitches. Okay, so I only have 2 rows left and my yarn is almost ending, so I'm going to show you a little magic trick. So how you can join the yarn in a seamless way, so without having to do like weird knots or anything like that. So you only need a little bit of water for this, and take one of the, so this is the one that I'm knitting with at the moment, and you can like a little bit break it up like this, and also, so this is the yarn that I'm going to be changing into, break it up a little bit like this, and then you just dip them in the water. All right, and then you place the yarns in your hand. So there's the one that goes to my knitwear, and then this is the one that goes to the new ball, and you place them so they overlap a little bit, so like this, and then you just squeeze them together and contour them a little bit, but hold them together in your lap, and then you're just going to rub really fast together that spot, and just rub it so your hands get all warm. Oh, what happened? And ta-da! Can you see that? And now they are joined together. So this spot might be a little bit thicker than the rest of the yarn, but honestly you cannot see that. And this is just such a nice way to join yarn so that you don't have to weave in all those ends in the end. Ta-da! So there you have it, a fully formed neckline. So you're going to do that for both the front piece and for the back piece. All right, next up we have the sleeves. First we're just going to cast on, and for this I'm going to be using 6mm needles to first cast on, because I want the rib to be tighter than the actual stockinette stitch. So just going to cast on 24 stitches. All right, there we have our first stitches. Okay, and then we're just going to start to rib knit. So we're knitting 1 and purling 1. One little tip, because it can get very confusing very quickly knowing if you just purled or knitted. So if we look here, now this is the first row, so it's even more tricky to see, but you can already see that the knit stitches, they look more like a little V or like that, and then the purl stitches look, they have like a little bump that goes through like horizontally, and the knit stitches are much more vertical. So that's just something that is good already very early on. Learn how to differentiate, because that will just save so many mistakes in the future when maybe you're watching TV or somebody says something and then you're like, oh wait, did I just knit or purl, or what am I supposed to do now? All right, and that's your first row of rib stitch. Then just continue, and on the other side, so now you can already see here, this is a knit stitch, and on the other side it's a purl stitch. So then we're just gonna knit it here. And for the sleeves, we're going to knit again 9 rows of rib stitch, so the same amount of rows as in the front and the back side of our sweaters. Alrighty, now I have knitted 9 rows of rib stitch, and now we are going to be switching to either your 8mm needles, or in my case I have the 8 and 7mm needle. So to create this form where it goes out towards the side, so you almost can't see because it's sort of curling itself a little bit, but that's the rib, and then we're going to be increasing stitches every 2 stitches. So we're going to be knitting 2 stitches and then increase 1, knit 2, increase 1, and I'll show you how to do that, but just so you sort of know where we're headed. And after that, it's just again knit, purl, stockinette stitch until then we just cast off. So, and we have a few increases here along the way, but I'll show you and I'll get to that. But that is what is coming up. So, all right, so grab your 8mm needle and then just slip the first stitch, knit 1, and now we are going to increase. And there are different ways to do increases. The way I like to do it, and where I feel like there aren't any weird holes appearing, is by taking some of this under yarn. So you can see here, that's that stitch, and then here's this stitch, and here in between, so not this stitch itself, but this yarn here that is sort of hanging loosely here, That one we are going to transform into a stitch. So with your right needle, go underneath it, and then you're going to put it on your left needle. And then because we don't want a big hole appearing here, so we're essentially going to treat this as a stitch now, but if I would just now knit it this way, there's a massive hole and I don't want that. So we are instead going to knit it through again the back loop. So if I can zoosh it a little. So I'm going to be knitting it through the back there. Wrap the yarn around, take the yarn through, and now I have created a stitch from nothing. And then again, knit two, and I'll show you that again. So you've knitted two, and then we're at the same position again. So again, here, this is the piece of yarn you want to be looking for. And then just help with the right needle to get it onto the left needle. And this is sort of how it looks from above. And then with your right needle, going to go through the back here. Wrap around the yarn, take it through, and you have now created a stitch from nothing. And then you just work the entire row across like this. You knit two, and then you pick up that yarn, knit through the back here. Oh, this one is a tight one. Knit through the back, ta-da, and continue. So after you've done the rib, then you're just going to continue stockinette stitch for approximately 18 centimeters, and then in both of these ends, so you knit one and then you increase one in both of the sides. Altogether, you are going to be increasing 3 times. So the first time is after you knitted approximately 18 centimeters of stockinette stitch. So you knit one, you increase one. Before you get to the end of the row, before one stitch, you again increase one, and then you repeat this 2 more times. So approximately after 4 centimeters, you do the second increase, and 4 centimeters, you do the third increase, and then approximately 4 centimeters, and then you are ready to cast off your sleeve. Well, hello there. It is the next day, and yesterday I got so caught up that I didn't really look carefully enough on the first sleeve, so I knitted the second sleeve very differently, which was, or the rib, I made it much shorter than on my original sleeve, so I had to knit a third sleeve. But now I have all the pieces together, and we can finally start to put them together. Before I put them together though, I am just going to dampen a kitchen cloth, and then I'm gonna iron all the pieces out. Now, some knitters will also block their pieces, so they will soak them and then dry them on a flat surface. I won't do it for this one now. I just don't feel like it's always that necessary. Maybe with color work, I feel like it's more necessary, and especially when I was knitting with my knitting machine, then I would always block all my pieces. But now I'm just gonna do like the damp kitchen towel iron trick, and then we're gonna put them together. And then the last step is that we are going to create the collar, so the neckband. So the way that happens is that after we've put all the pieces together, just sewing with a tapestry needle, we are going to take our 6mm, 40 centimeters circular needle and pick up stitches from the neckline, and then just do a rib that will knit it pretty far, or it will be pretty tall, because then we're gonna fold it double, because I just feel like that gives a much more contemporary look and avoids that kind of homemade feeling and becomes more like a handmade feeling. And that is what we're going to do now. Okay, so I have now joined all the seams together. So this is how the sweater looks right now. Then I also again steamed all these seams just to make it a little bit neater. And now it's come time to do the neckline. So I'm going to grab the circular needle. This is a 60 centimeter, 7mm circular needle, just because I want the collar to be a little bit looser than these rib edges. And I'm going to be picking up, I counted 86 stitches from this neckline. So that means that it's 43 stitches on each side. So let's do that. So here I have my shoulders seam, and I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to take this needle and I'm just going to start and pick up stitches from here. So I want 43 all together, and don't get too close. So don't take these, there will then be holes, but take stitches that are a few, like 1 centimeter off the edge, and then you just pick them up on your needle and you go all the way through, and 43 for one and 43 for the other, so that you'll have 86 stitches all together in the end. And this can be a little stiff and tricky. That's okay, that is unfortunately how it is, but it's better that they're a little bit stiff because again, we want to avoid any holes appearing. All right, so here is how it looks. I've picked up now my stitches, and now I'm just going to first knit one row, just plain knit, and then I'll start to do my rib knitting. And the reason I do first one row of just knitting is because this first row can be a little bit tight and tricky, so it's just easier to just start with a plain row of knitting first. All right, so now I've knitted the first row, just regular knit, and now I'm going to rib knit. So I'm going to knit one, purl one for approximately probably 10 centimeters, so around 4 inches or a little bit more, and then I'm going to fold over that and sew that in, and then the sweater is complete. Oh, bingo, no. All right, so this is how it looks right now. So I knitted the rib, and now I'm just going to fasten this collar, but so far, I mean, it looks really nice. The sleeves are much shorter than I actually had planned, but I kind of like it actually. I think it gives it a pretty nice and kind of like modern feel, because this is still like pretty boxy and bulky. So then I think the sleeves actually balance that in a nice way. And yeah, now I'm just gonna like try to sew this collar together, and I probably, because it became like very loose when I casted it off, because I didn't want it to be too tight, so I'm gonna probably have to, when I sew it, like tighten it a little bit. But yeah, so far I think this is going to be a super nice sweater to wear, for example, with a dress.